Welcome back to another episode of the Office Hours Podcast with Professor Brad Perkins. Today we are going to stray a little bit off the beaten path on the podcast so far. Most of them have been kind of about contemporary issues with hiring and mechanical contractors and consultants. But today I wanted to bring up a topic that always comes up in my yearly or semester-wide classes every year when we talk about structural steel. And the subject is the World Trade Center collapse. So we have an academic purpose here. The academic purpose is to give some time to do a more in-depth discussion on this subject than I normally would get during class. Almost always, without fail, someone asks, well, what about this and what about this? And I don't mean to discount those in class or minimalize someone's questions. The problem is that the subject requires a much longer analysis and a much longer discussion than I have time for during my scheduled 241 class. So with that in mind, we have an actual academic purpose here, and that is to give some time to the discussion. Now, to have a real conversation, you need to have opposing viewpoints. And to have a real conversation, you need to have some people that maybe have questions. So what I've done is I've invited some guests in to the studio here with that express purpose. Because, personal opinion, in our world today, people are getting uncomfortable about having discussions with anybody they disagree with. And that is not healthy. It's not healthy. We should be able to have discussions with people and viewpoints that we disagree with. They should be polite. They should be professional discussions, but you should still engage in them no matter how bad it is. So I've purposely found someone to ask some questions, and my friend Dan Runyon is here, and I'm going to have him introduce himself. Dan, why don't you introduce yourself to the students for me?
Hey, my name's Dan Runyon. I'm a retired Army officer. I've known Brad my whole life. We grew up in the same hometown together, and so we've known each other our whole lives. So we have open discussions. With with a robust debate.
The robust
over an adult beverage, maybe on occasion.
On occasion, and maybe a cigar as well.
Maybe a cigar. And so this particular topic has been one that Brad and I have talked about a number of times, and I think that was the spark for him saying, "Hey, why don't we come talk about this?"
Yeah, because once again, like I said, you can't really have a conversation if all you do is invite people that agree with you, and that seems to be the trend in today's media. Is I'm going to have a conversation, get a whole bunch of people to agree with me and tell me how great I am. All right, and like Dan said, since we have literally known each other since
probably pushing 50 years.
Yes, 50 years probably. Okay, like when I was a little kid. Like his dad was our family veterinarian. Right, his wife I went to preschool with. Okay, so we go back a minute or two, and the beauty of that is literally we can say about anything, and it doesn't matter. Like he's a total Army pogue, and I can make fun of that right there.
Squid.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Or Marine, whichever one you claim today.
Whichever I claim today. That is so wrong, right? I was never commissioned, so not really a Marine. So, but the point is that we can have discussions and still be friends afterwards, and that's important. All right, so Dan is representing the other side of the argument that I would probably take. All right, and then here I want my students to introduce themselves for this.
I'm Olivia. I am a junior in construction engineering with a mechanical emphasis, and I just am excited for this. I'm kind of unbiased and did my own research, so.
Okay, awesome, which I encourage you to do. Go ahead.
I'm Bryant. I came in with Olivia, and I'm just surprised there aren't more beverages and cigars sitting around the table.
Yeah.
That's a good recommendation.
Well, that's
I
a
think
great
so.
recommendation. I'm not sure IT would buy on that one. Okay, so
Water
what I need to
bottles.
do is set up some system so that we can have it in the pavilion, cigars and beverages and debate.
Yes.
Okay, I'll work on that. I got to get some technology for that one. All right. All right. Well, and I do absolutely thank you guys for coming because, that's it's different. This particular topic, and here, let me be clear on this. This is a topic that must be approached with seriousness and reverence. All right? At the end of the day, when this happened, over 3,000 people were dead. All right? And Dan and I, we were just talking. We were like, you know what? Students weren't even alive when this happened.
I wasn't.
What year were you born?
2003.
Yep.
Yeah, you have to ask
More
that.
than a decade.
Well, 2 years too late.
When you guys said 50 friends for 50 years, that's over double our age.
Yeah, sure is.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, just had to age you
Where's,
really
this,
quick.
where's this gray hair come from?
Yeah, where's all this gray hair come from anyway? All right. But what I'm saying is it's different. And it's one of those, for our generations, this is one of those seminal events where, you remember exactly where you were when it happened.
Give me your 10-second story.
10-second story.
Or 30, whatever.
I was at work. I got there early. I was sitting in my office at 7:45 Central, right? And then someone comes in, and they're like, hey, did you hear on the radio? A plane hit the World Trade Center. And I was thinking Cessna,
Yeah.
something like that. And then somebody comes in a short time later, says, oh, my God, a plane hit the World Trade Center. We're like, yeah, we heard. They're like, no, a second one did. A second one. At first, I thought it's got to be bad reporting. I mean, this wasn't a time when everybody was videotaping everything. I was like, this is just bad reporting. Somebody heard it, repeated it. Somebody heard it again, said, oh, a second one hit. I was like, this is crap. And then you're trying. And here's the crazy thing: there was no news. Okay, the internet existed. Right, but it wasn't the continuous news cycle like it is today. Like you could find out anything instantly. So we were sitting here at the desk. We're like, what happened? What happened? What happened? And radio reports were trying to describe it. And then they're trying to say, the size of the airplanes that hit. And I was like, that's not a Cessna. I mean, we're talking about some of the biggest airplanes known to man. And then, I mean, in very, very short order, all of us got the, this has got to be on purpose, right? Because you just don't fly a plane like that 100 feet off the deck. You just don't. Okay, so Dan, what's your quick?
I was teaching ROTC. We had just gotten done with PT over Lead Rack or the football stadium or somewhere. I was back in the armory where the ROT still is today. And I was watching TV, watching the morning news. And they broke away for a news report that the World Trade Center had been hit by an airplane. And so it was already one of the buildings was on fire, smoking. And as they were talking about it, trying to figure out what kind of a crazy accident this could have been, while they were reporting with the camera on it, you saw a second jet fly in, and everybody's seen the replays of it. And I just went like, oh my God, this is not an accident. This is terrorist. They're doing it on purpose. And then so I watched it for a while, but when I walked out of the armory onto a weekday morning at 9 or 10 o'clock or whatever time it was, where they should be bustling with students and cars and people walking everywhere, it's completely empty. It was such a surreal feeling. And I got in my car and drove home, which was like 6 blocks just on the north side of Vinker, and talked with Shelley, and she didn't know about it yet, and it was just like, oof. It was like, and I was thinking, I think we're at war.
Yeah, I was too. I was absolutely thinking. Here, fun fact I was telling Dan before you guys got here, is that so at that time, Gina's grandmother was living with us, and she was almost 90. And get this, she was in her 20s during Pearl Harbor, and then was living with us during the World Trade Center attack. And I remember her being absolutely terrified. She had a different sense for the magnitude, right? Because from that moment on, we were in some stage of invading someone and at war somewhere for like the next 20 years, and at that time I wasn't thinking any such thing. I was like, okay, I was literally thinking, we're going to find who did this and we're going to go kick the crap out of them.
It'll be over.
And it'll be over.
Week or few.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I thought. But I was very wrong. Those particular conflicts really just wrapped up in essence. So it set off a cascade of events that was unexpected. I'll just put it that way. It was just unexpected. And this particular discussion is not on the right, wrong, or indifference of everything that happened after that. All right? I really just want to stick to the structural parts of the analysis. What happened? What do some people think happened? What are some questions about what happened? And get into it that way. All right? So I guess I'd ask, before we get started, for our two students that were not alive when this happened.
Can I throw one more thing in real quick?
Please. Yeah.
I just want to fill in an important piece of my bio. I'm in no way, shape, or form an engineer, not a structural guy. I was an Army engineer, but we build roads and bridges that are put together stuff, and we use lots of explosives to blow those same things up. So that's my expertise in this, which is nothing. All this is Conspiracy Dan saying, that something doesn't feel right about this, and I've never just felt solid about what the government gave. And now after 33 years of serving the government and COVID and all these other things, I'm like, I trust no one. So that's my perspective.
And thank you, because that does bring me to two important things. One is that if there's anything that I've learned from not a lifetime like you have serving the government, but a few years of serving the government, I'm suspicious of a lot of stuff. Okay, I am. And on one hand, you have the Bigfoot conspiracy, and on the one hand, you have the Wuhan lab conspiracy, which is not a conspiracy anymore. Every reputable organization in the world says, yeah, maybe the Wuhan virus did come from a lab. But there was a point in this country when to say such a thing was, oh my gosh, conspiracy talk, right? Yeah, you just
were canceled.
Yeah, you were canceled. You just didn't do that. They get you off of Facebook and YouTube and all these other things. So understand that I'm going to say conspiracy thought is a sliding scale. I also want to say towards that end is that questioning government and authority and the standard line is a good and healthy thing that should always be done. If you're in an organization that everybody thinks the same, you need to leave that organization or hire some people that think differently. That is not healthy for any group, organization, entity, whatever it is, to exactly think the same thing all the time.
Don't be in an be in an echo chamber.
Nope. No. Having someone in your organization that disagrees with you is a healthy thing that you should absolutely embrace. Okay, so let me start there. The other thing that I want to say is henceforth and from ever now on, you shall be known as Conspiracy Dan. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'll
You're
take
welcome.
that title gladly.
And we will probably have more conspiracy theories at some point on this particular podcast because what the heck, it's fun. All right, so with that in mind, I guess, students, did you have any preconceived ideas or maybe just while you were doing research, something interesting that you found that you didn't know?
Yeah, so obviously we've learned from the media about all of this, and I guess the three biggest things that are talked about is obviously one tower going down, another tower going down, and then also the Pentagon was targeted. But a lot of people don't know about Building 7, which is something that I uncovered, and I even asked my mom about, who literally lived through the experience, and she didn't even know about it either. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That surprises me, I guess.
Yeah.
And probably.
And my stepdad, too, didn't really know about it.
And just to add to those number of planes and incidents,
Mm-hmm.
the one that went down in Pennsylvania was probably headed to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
Yep.
the White House, one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, no, that's good. That's good stuff. Okay, that's good stuff to throw out there.
Yeah, I just uncovered that Building 7 collapse as well. I'd say that nowadays, especially the younger generation, they're kind of more skeptical of the government as a whole, and I think that really showed in this most recent election.
Good call. Yeah. No, straight up. Well, and those doubts have been well founded.
Right.
Okay, and something I want to be absolutely positively clear on is that with regards to politics, you'll notice in class I try to stay away from politics a lot. Okay, I mean, I have a lot of opinions, but politics I stay away from, and here's why. I used to be very one side on politics. I'm not talking about philosophies. I'm very, what I would call probably, I lean a lot more libertarian than anything else. But as such, which kind of brings me closer to one side politically, and I used to be very active, and I kind of got disillusioned with the whole thing. The best description of me would be, I think, do you have to read Romeo and Juliet? Right? You remember the family member that gets stabbed because, right, and he basically says to Romeo, you know, and the guy he's fighting, a pox on both your houses. That's where I'm at. I am literally. I was on one side, and now I'm like a pox on both your houses because I'm suspicious of all of you politicians. So I just want to throw that out there, okay? Right? Because I think it's important, because as I'm going to present a lot of stuff, there's opinions, there's facts, and there's theories. And we need to be clear about which is which, I think. I try to do that in class, you know, and on a discussion like this, I think it's important to understand the difference. All right? All right. With that being said, you know what? Since Dan is guest, I'm going to let him go first.
I would actually appreciate, because
Awesome.
I don't have a great format.
Okay.
I'm probably more on the rebut side of things.
Okay.
Or to bring up questions throughout that are timely with your presentation.
Oh.
If you don't mind, I'd really like it if you do. You've got an actual presentation.
Sure.
And then we can all talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, you know,
I'm not trying to
it's a habit.
disrupt your
It's
flow.
a habit. No. That is absolutely fine. All right. So here, I want let's if you look at the monitor here, okay. Oh, hold on a second. I don't want to. All right. Let's just take a look at. I got to switch over here to laptop. Okay. All right. There's the World Trade Center as it stood. We're talking about over 100 stories. World Trade Center 7 looks like kind of a small building. All right. It's 42-ish stories.
I thought it was 49 maybe.
It's in the 40s.
Yeah,
well,
it's in the 40s.
either way, it's taller than any building in Iowa.
Okay.
Okay, just
47 stories.
47.
I was
Thank you.
closer than you
47. You were closer. Good job. But anyway, 47 stories for the collapse here. Important thing here. World Trade Center 7 is not an insignificant building. It's massive by itself. It's just next to these two, it looks tiny.
Minuscule.
All right. What hit them? A Boeing 767. One of them was traveling at roughly just under 500 miles an hour. The other one hit the other one at roughly 600 miles an hour. So they had tweaked the jets to full power. All right. So and they did it not terribly long after takeoff. Did they take off from Boston, Dan? Do you remember that?
I was thinking
Or was it New York?
I thought it was New York.
Maybe it was
They
New
went
York.
out and
Maybe
then
it was
turned back.
Okay, that's what happened. It went out and it turned back. Was it the Pentagon took off from Boston?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So anyway, so shortly after takeoff, and this is one of the reasons the terrorists selected these particular jets, is that this was cross the country type of flight, so they'd be fully loaded.
Full of fuel.
Full of fuel. What does that mean? All right, Boeing 767 holds 20,000. Now, there's a couple of different models of Boeing 767, so depending on exactly which model, you might see these numbers vary a little bit. All right, but that is 20,000 gallons of jet fuel, each weighing just under 400,000 pounds. Now think about that
How
for
does
a
that
second.
thing get in the air?
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
see, there's the real conspiracy, is how does a thing like that even
Is
leave
that
the
including
ground?
people?
That's everything.
'Kay.
That's everything. That's
Okay.
that's
Assuming full plane,
full plane,
cargo,
cargo,
all the things.
all the stuff,
'Kay.
400,000 pounds roughly.
Okay.
Yikes. When,
That's a lot of lift.
that's
Yeah.
a lot of lift, that's a lot of thrust.
Both.
So here's the thing. When you are pushing 400,000 pounds of stuff, including 20,000 gallons of jet fuel, at approximately 500 miles an hour and you slam into a large stationary object, the net explosive force is the equivalent of 480,000 pounds of TNT. All right, think about that for a second.
I've done 500-pound booms with C4.
Yeah?
Not 500,000.
All right, well, think about that boom. Okay, put a few thousand of them together,
Yeah.
and now you got the force of that plane hitting a building. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the building at first, because it was very unique. And we've talked about, we talk about this building in 241 because, we go with, rigid core versus rigid perimeter.
This was a core, right?
Well, no, it was so dang big that it had a little bit of both characteristics.
Yeah.
The perimeter was a whole bunch of columns. I think I got the number of columns maybe on one of the next slides. Right? And they were like on about 2-foot centers all the way around. They were like a big square box column. Okay? And those handled the majority of the loads of the office spaces. In the center, there was a bunch of columns that if you look at that, see that diagram on the right, that part in yellow? All those X's are elevators. The whole center column arrangement, forest, if you will, was to support the elevators. Now, notice these elevators were unique in that they had local elevators and then express elevators. So you could take express elevator that only went to what they were called like sky lobbies. So let's say that I want to go somewhere in the 80th floor. I don't take an elevator straight to that floor. I take it to a lobby. That's probably that second or third one up there. Then I get out of the express elevator, go over to an elevator that serves a bank of floors. Local, and I take that local one up there. But what that meant, though, still is a whole bunch of elevator shafts. And so all the columns in the center that you see are there to support the massive loads from those elevator shafts and elevators and the hoistways and stairways and everything in the core. But then the perimeter was here. You see that long, like the long dimension where from the perimeter to the core columns, that was a 60-foot span. All right, so my students here, I have them do a design for a building, right? Is there anything magical about that 60-foot span in our design? Did you guys run up against that?
Yeah, it's like virtually impossible to.
It's on the cusp of what we could have done.
Yes, it is right there on the edge of it. At least the engineering books that I give them, very, 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 very simplified design for like a rough layout. It is right there on the edge of what's practical. All right. So that 60 foot that truss is spanning from the outside perimeter wall to the inside face of those interior columns. That's not an accident. That is literally them thinking, how big can we make this?
That's about as far as we can go.
That's about as far as we can go in practical terms. Yeah. But notice there aren't any intermediate columns between that outside perimeter and the inside elevator way.
Horizontal.
Right.
Horizontal ones.
Yeah. Well, no, that's a beam if it's horizontal.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, there's no vertical beams in between there. Either beams. I'm sorry, I just said that wrong. Yeah. There aren't any columns in between there. Okay.
I see what you're saying.
Okay. All right. So, and that was on purpose. The whole point of this is that it gives us a wide open office space. Once you get outside of the perimeter elevators, anyone renting a floor can do anything they want with the layout. You want offices or open plan or whatever it is, put walls anywhere you want. It doesn't matter. None of them are load bearing. You can change them to your heart's content. That was one of the big attractions for this particular space, is that floor by floor by floor, you could do about anything you wanted, and you had a lot of perimeter space, open space, I should say, to do that. All right. This analysis, and this one's a little bit harder to see. this comes from one of the NIST documents, and it shows which columns were severed, and the ones that are in red are severed. So on the diagram on the left, where the airplane struck it at the top of the page, you'll see a whole bunch of red columns. And what you will see there is floor system structural damage, and then some mild damage, where everything in blue is where the fireproofing for the floor area on just this one floor was stripped off. And that is well over half of the floor. All right, fireproofing, I'm going to talk about that one in a second, but so let's just come back to that in a second. So, and then what you see like, let's see here, at least 6 of those interior columns are completely severed and multiples other damaged. The building on the right, notice once again, the plane enters at the bottom of that diagram, cuts off 10 of those interior columns in the core, and then a whole bunch along the perimeter. And then notice there's 2 there on the top right. That's actually where one of the jet engines punched through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and took out 2 of those on the perimeter. And notice there's 1 on the left, and that's where one of the jet engines punched through and just happened to take out 1 on the opposite end. All right, so important things to understand here is that no matter how many there was during design, a whole bunch were taken out on multiple floors.
Now,
Okay.
let me ask this, because that's
Sure.
what
Okay.
I think I've read.
All right, hold on a second. All right, go ahead and hit it. Yeah.
I think it's true.
Yes.
That the primary source of strength for the building were the center ones.
No, that's not true.
And the perimeter ones were kind of secondary-ish.
Okay.
I'm not saying they didn't provide support.
No.
Square me away there.
Okay. The primary source of the gravity loads for the elevator shaft, yes, was those center columns. Okay. The ones on the perimeter also did a whole lot of structural load. You can't have that 60-foot span
Yep.
without them being fairly well distributed between the 2.
Sure.
Okay, but here's what is true, is that the exterior columns did nothing to support the elevator shaftways. Nothing. All right, does that make sense?
Yep.
But for the loads of your average office space, I'd have to say that it was distributed between the 2. You have a simple support. I've got a truss, and at one end it's attached to the perimeter, and at one end it's attached to the column next to the elevator. It's nothing special.
50-50.
50-50. Whatever load is on there, it's going to be about 50-50. Now, the interior ones did support extra load from the elevators. So to say that the interior supported more, I think is fair.
From a building
standpoint,
That's
yes. Okay, now, but here's the difference. The perimeter ones supported all the wind load and
Sure.
all the twisting, and that is significant in a building because it's 208 feet across.
You watch a semi driving down the road versus a car on a sideways windy day and watch the semi go because all that surface area.
Right.
Imagine the surface area in a windy day in New York City.
Exactly why the tube was done. Is that it, and that's why those windows were so narrow, is that it made it to resist. See, this was before things like...
They didn't have the brake, did they? Because now they have the brakes in them.
See, now what they're referring to in class is we talk about skyscraper design and thermal mass dampers, right? Big, massive pieces of concrete that actually swing from the building in the perimeter itself. Okay, that's a 241 topic, but it's something that we get into briefly. This building didn't have that kind of technology. Tuned mass dampers didn't exist. So you're like, wow, I got to build a really tall building, and it's going to be above everything else, and, it's right on the ocean. Gosh, it's going to get a lot of wind. How do we do that? A whole bunch of thin columns that ring the entire thing so that that building is practically a tube. That's the best way to describe it, I think, is a big tube. And so you're correct. One part was doing more work than the other, but they were both doing a massive amount of work. And here's the important thing: you can't. They require each other to work. All right, it is a system, and that's an important thing to understand about any system is that it is a system, and everybody has to carry their own share of the load. A chain is only as strong as its weakest piece. You know, those are cliches, but very, very true statements. All right. So does that answer your question on the structure?
It does. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So here, I'm going to switch back, and let's go to... All right. This is how each truss was put together. All right. So there's a 207 or 8 feet on each side. There is 42,000 square feet of floor space on each floor. A 42,000 square foot building is a big building by itself.
The Barilla factory is about 100,000 square feet.
Oh, wow.
Total.
Or 2 floors of the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's keep that in mind. Is that? But here, look at this. You know, does this look all that cutting edge for things that students that you see in the book?
No.
Looks like a joy, right? It looks like a open web steel truss.
Yeah.
It is an open web steel truss. Nothing
That's what
terribly
my project
exciting.
looked like.
Yes, it is. You know why? Because it's cost efficient, right? All right, so they're right there at that edge of what we might see in an occupied building with that 60-foot main span. Is it possible to span further? Absolutely. Okay, absolutely. It gets tricky and things get very deep, and but you could span even further distances. So, what I'm trying to say here is the World Trade Center was at one point it was a marvel of engineering, and yet the individual pieces weren't terribly special. They were steel. We're talking steel columns. We're talking joists. We're talking metal deck with concrete poured over the top. I mean, there was 4-inch concrete slab on that fluted metal deck that held everything together. Now, here's something important, and it's a small note here on my handout, but at the impact level, there are 59 of those perimeter columns on each side. They are 3 foot 4 inches apart. Okay, that's pretty narrow little span there. Okay, that's why when you look at it, it looks mostly steel, and for a modern skyscraper, it wasn't terribly wide open with windows. All right, and this is why. It's that tube construction. Okay. All right. Let's talk about fireproofing for a second. Okay. Until the mid-70s, asbestos was widely used as fireproofing. Okay, why?
Cheap.
And
it's really good.
Really effective. Asbestos is awesome until you breathe it. Okay, then it has some downsides.
Don't breathe it.
Right? Don't breathe it.
I don't recommend it.
Right? I mean, heck, I bet you watch. Half our buildings on campus have asbestos in them, and as long as we don't touch it or mess with it, it works great. Okay, this is fascinating to me, and actually, I have a former instructor of mine that was on the NIST panel. All right, one of our instructors here at Iowa State University taught me reinforced concrete design. He was on this. And I won't say who it is because I don't have permission, to quote him or anything. But, as we were talking about this, he's like, I wonder what would have happened if they hadn't stopped the use of asbestos. He says, because one of the biggest things is that when that plane hits, they had switched.
What year was it built?
It was early 70s.
Okay.
Right, April of 1970. New York Department of Air Resources ordered the World Trade Center contractors to stop spraying asbestos. They only got the first couple of floors sprayed with asbestos, and then they were required to use a vermiculite plaster. Okay, vermiculite, a good insulator, all right?
Maybe not a good fireproofer.
Here, you know what? Thank you for that, because it makes me think of something. It's called fireproofing in our industry, that is an absolute positive misnomer.
Retardant?
Fire retardant is the best. It is supposed to slow the rate of heat transfer. It does not fireproof it. That's not a thing, right? For sufficiently hot burning fire, nothing is fireproof. With that in mind, they switched mixes. Hey, who's excited to try the new mix that the government gave us? Yeah, okay. All right. That is not awesome, okay? In World Trade Center 1, 43 of those 47 interior columns were stripped on more than one floor. Stripped of their fireproofing material, the spray-on stuff. 60,000 square feet of truss space was stripped by the collision. World Trade Center 2, 39 of the 47 interior columns were stripped, and on more than one floor, 80,000 square foot of truss space was removed. So it's not like the plane hit just one floor. You know, it plowed through multiple levels, pieces of things going everywhere.
One was pretty flat, and one
Well, yeah, one was
One
was careening at an angle, and I think it was that one that did them. That one collapsed first, even though it hit second. Didn't? Hold on a second.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
because it was lower.
It was lower. Yeah, the lower one,
and sideways.
lower and angled and faster, it collapsed first. All right, so let's come back to this fireproofing thing here in a second, okay? All right. So I got a little diagram here kind of the way things were, or at least theory, right? Because this is theory. You know, we can't exactly go there, okay? So once the plane hits either side, and this kind of shows the one that's careening a little bit more and hit lower, all the weight that is above that impact now, and as you know this, that looks fairly familiar because it's the pattern that you would see in a flat arch. In other words, the weight above it is being distributed, but there's a part that's just going to sag. And that's what this is showing. And what happens is the building still stands, obviously, after impact, but now the loads have changed. Loads have to be shared and moved around, and whatever they were designed for before the impact, now after the impact, those loads are drastically different. All right. Okay. We get fire on those floors that are already damaged. Okay. So what happens with fire? Common misnomer is that, well, hey, it's a steel building, steel doesn't burn, steel must do really well in a fire. Absolutely positively true, absolutely positively false. Steel actually has a less of a design life in a fire than wood. Unprotected, right? I'm talking about unprotected wood, unprotected steel.
Mm-hmm.
Wood will last longer in a fire than steel will.
How do you get apples to apples there?
How do you get apples to apples? Well, funny that you should ask, Dan, right? Okay, here, okay, let me go to...
2x4 versus a I-beam?
Of an object capable of carrying the same weight. Okay? Whatever that is in wood versus whatever that is in steel, and we put a fire of a certain temperature in there, right? The wood burns and chars through.
Mm-hmm.
Still structural, even though we start missing part of that wood, it is still structurally sound. This is a stress strain diagram on the left. Okay, this probably looks similar to something that maybe our students see in mechanics and materials. Stress strain diagrams. Notice that these are at different, same material. Steel, carbon steel used in structures, different temperature. And I am going to apologize because I couldn't find this particular diagram in degrees Fahrenheit. It ticked me off. Okay, because I don't like
SI units
yeah, I don't like
are
SI units.
always
Right?
of no use.
Yes. All right. So let me interpret this a little bit. Okay. If that one at the top left represents 100% steel strength, and right, notice as the different colors as we get hotter. And I think the important one is the 600 degrees Celsius
Yep.
line.
Yep, concur.
Okay. All right. So it's 600 degrees Celsius, which is, help me out here,
I don't know.
right about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. 600 degrees Celsius is right about 1,000. Notice that on the diagram on the right, the strength of that steel at 550 Celsius is like 60% of whatever it was originally. All you have to do, if you get to 700 degrees Celsius, I want you to look at that. You're down around 0.2.
Meaning 20% of its original strength.
20% of its original strength before failure. All right. 700 degrees Celsius. Now, I think there's some debate as to exactly what the temperature was
For
inside
sure.
the building.
For sure.
All right. However, I don't think it's up for debate that it was at least 600 degrees and could have been 700.
Is it known that the steel was unprotected? Or it's got that Vermeer plaster on it? Okay.
Okay.
Good question.
Yes, that is an awesome question. So the question is, here, hold on a second. All right. So your question is it known for a fact, or is this a theory, that the protection was stripped off during the impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or just like in general, like is the steel,
Was it protected?
was
to
it
begin with?
protected? And then
It was protected to begin with.
a known fact or theory that it was completely stripped
I think that it is a theory that would be hard to refute. All right? Obviously, no one was in there to investigate at the time.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's not a guess as to whether or not those columns were severed. That's not a theory. We could look at the picture and say,
Yeah.
"Wow, look at those. They're sheared off." Right? That's an absolute fact. I think, Dan, would you?
Yeah, the ones that the plane went through.
Yes, the
were
ones that
severed.
were severed.
I think the question really is, the ones that weren't severed,
Mm-hmm.
were they protected? And if they were protected, what does that mean for this fire? Like, what does it just delay? Because like we were talking about, fire retardant. So is it just helping the fire's heat not penetrate the steel for a certain time period? Or like a gun safe, it doesn't protect it forever. Eventually, once the house fire is burning, the inside of the safe's going to get just as hot as the outside of the safe eventually.
There it is, right? I think it would take, speaking of gun safes, think of a gun safe that you might have. A good gun safe would be 1,200 degrees for 30 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes. Ooh. Okay,
And almost every gun safe ends up in the basement. Goes through the floor
yeah,
after it burns.
after it burns.
And it's got smoldering stuff on top of it, kind
Right.
of like this stuff. But
Yeah, but here's the point: is that you take steel and all you do is cut it. You're exposing that steel. It's raw.
sure.
All right. You take the violence of what would we say? 300,000-400,000 pounds of stuff. You're stripping off because that plaster is not terribly adhesive. It's not meant to withstand violence, abuse, explosion, any of that
Hip
stuff.
plaster in an old house with a hammer, it breaks off.
Breaks
and
right off.
cracks and
All right. So
But let's go. I don't want to. I think we're probably on the same sheet of music there.
Yep.
The point, a point that I don't know. I think we just bounced off of this close to 600 number, so I don't know how valuable it is to the discussion. That jet fuel burns at like in the range of 500 or 600 degrees Celsius or something like that. Maybe it was Fahrenheit. I've lost the number.
No. It's definitely Celsius. I thought it was like about 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit that jet fuel burns.
Okay, so
Right here.
I think it's.
You want to look that up for me
I
real
think
quick?
it's like, we'll call it 600, and so
Okay.
if we're right on the Celsius,
Yep.
then the question goes. Go ahead.
It's looking like
Ignition of jet fuel is
300
about
to 400 degrees
Well,
Celsius.
that's ignition. Right, that's ignition. What is this? What is the sustained burn temp?
2,000 degrees Celsius is kind of what we're seeing.
No,
here.
not Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really?
That's kind of what I was seeing too.
Is that
when
like, I
was
don't think
doing
so.
my,
I thought it was
That
like,
seems. I thought it was 1,500.
I thought it was like 1,100.
Fahrenheit.
That wasn't one of my current
Oh, okay. Oh, that
pieces
wasn't
of
okay.
data that I brought
All
because
right.
I knew it from before. But
Mm-hmm.
the
Burns at 8 to 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit.
and
So
so
1,500.
Okay.
That's what I was.
And
It
I
burn,
was-
in a plane, it burns at 2,000 degrees Celsius.
Right. Because
per,
now it's
perfect tons of
turbocharged.
O2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But so in a enclosed environment
Mm-hmm.
with lots of other smoke from
Mhm.
the man-made materials in and around, the stuff I was reading was
Mm-hmm.
saying you'd be lucky to get to 500.
See, I would probably argue with that. And
There's
here's
no
why.
O2 feeding the fire.
There's
Not-
there's a
not
pretty big hole
none.
on the side.
Not none, but it's
Okay.
restricted.
It's restricted. However, what you would get here that you would not get in like a test chamber is the fact that you're in the middle of a building and that heat has nowhere to go. Kind of like with a kiln, you get hotter temperatures not by making the fire hotter, by insulating around it.
Yep.
And while the steel might be stripped off on the layers where it impacted, it's actually insulated above and below on the intact floors.
Yeah. But the kiln,
So,
yeah,
okay, so I guess
is it continuing to increase temperature or is it just continuing to burn? I don't understand exactly how this temperature thing is going to go. Is it going to get hotter and hotter like a kiln?
mhm.
I have one. You turn it on and that thing just keeps applying
Mhm.
heat with the insulation and it goes up. So I understand your analogy here.
What'll happen is it will find some point at equilibrium. Okay? Not perfectly insulated, and I mean a kiln's well insulated.
Yeah.
Not wide open like just a pool of it on the floor that I'm burning. So we have some competing factors here. One is it does continue to burn, and I don't think that's probably subject. It did not go out.
Yeah.
The fires did not go out.
For sure.
So it continues to burn. It gets enough oxygen to burn, thing one. Thing two, that heat is contained within a lot of the interior of the space.
Mm-hmm.
So my gut feeling is that I tend to think, I guess my theory is that it probably would have at least, here, I'm going to go back to my diagram here. I think it would have at least reached that 600 degrees Celsius line.
That makes-
Possibly 7 in spots. And maybe locally even hotter and locally much lower. You know, I think it's
Yeah.
going to be a continuum. But here is the thing that I want you to notice. We are down around 30% of initial strength.
Even if we called it 50.
Even
at the-
if we call it
At the
50.
600.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where my point of argument would be. I'd
Yes.
like to just hold it at let's just call it 50% for everybody at the
Yep.
table and go
Yeah,
see
we'll
what
call it
happens
there.
from there.
All right.
Okay.
I think 50% is probably a good analysis. Now, there's a couple of other things going on here. Let's talk about design of buildings, which I'm not a material specialist. Okay. However, I do know a lot about fires. Okay. And I know a little bit about fire protection design. If you look at our design fires in an office space, on the left, both of these are excerpts from one of the textbooks I use with regards to fire protection design from NFPA. And thing one, you never are going to assume that the whole building is on fire. In fact, you're probably not going to assume more than 4,000 square feet of space is on fire at once in an office building.
Okay.
That is not a consideration. All right. Active firefighting is assumed. Here, notice it's a fire suppression system,
Yep.
not a fire extinguishing system. Fire sprinklers are not supposed to extinguish fires. The normal water-based ones that you're going to find in an office building.
Yep.
Does not extinguish a fire. It is assuming
Which this was equipped with.
yes, which
The-
it was
the
equipped with.
Sprinkler heads.
Sprinkler heads throughout the space, yes. So the point is that no matter what, this fire is so far outside of the design fire for an office building, it's not even we're not even on the same planet in terms of discussions with the design fire and the fire that happened. Firefighting is assumed and not for an unlimited time. In other words, at most, we are probably going to assume 1 hour. In 1 hour, that fire is under control by firefighters. The purpose of the sprinkler system is to delay that fire long enough to get everybody out, get the firefighters in. That's what that fire protection system is assuming. The fire protection system does not assume any of itself was destroyed. There are no redundant parts. There's not redundant sprinklers. There's not redundant fire mains. The destruction of the fire suppression system is not a design consideration when you are laying out the fire protection. It's just not. All right?
Do we know if the plane severed? Does it come up on a certain side or in the center? Where was
Probably
the-
comes up in the center.
Yeah, in a,
Okay.
whatever, 12-inch main or something, pushing water up and.
Probably not even 12.
Yeah.
You're probably looking at, a 6-inch main going through the center of this thing.
Do we know if they were severed in either building?
I'm going to go ahead and guarantee you that the branch piping was severed. We're talking about small copper pipes. Once you get away
Were
from
they
that,
copper? They weren't cast.
the smaller ones were probably copper.
I'm saying
they could
the
be
main-
steel. They could be steel. No, all right. No. The mains are probably steel. The smaller stuff could be like threaded copper, or I'm sorry, soldered copper or threaded steel. Could go either way.
Yeah.
Stainless or not stainless.
Either
regular
iron.
steel, carbon steel pipe is pretty cheap. So given the 70s, I'm probably betting a lot of it was probably carbon steel, the smaller stuff. Here's the thing. Those smaller pipes, I don't give them any prayer of withstanding at the
Yeah.
level at the levels that the airplane hit.
Yeah.
I give them zero chance of making it through the impact.
Near zero.
Near zero. Right? Did you have something, Liv? I thought you were about ready to.
No, I was gonna ask if you thought that there was like some sort of system where like if on the top floors like it would shut off the suppression system if there was like damage, but the lower ones would still be intact. I guess.
I doubt
Is
it.
everything above the sever?
What's that?
Everything above the severed pipe is not getting fed.
Is not getting fed.
Yeah.
But
Well,
lower
okay.
still would. Or
Once the pipe is
Here's the
severed,
problem.
wouldn't there be no pressure? In the
There'd be no
system?
pressure. Once the pipe is somewhere in that mess of a building, there's probably a 6-inch main squirting out water like crazy that is not helping any.
Yeah.
All right? And in other words, nothing above it's going to get water at all, and probably there would be some pressure below it,
But reduced.
but way reduced,
Yeah.
if any. So let's just say that we are firmly outside the bounds of what a system is capable of or would ever be considered to handle.
Yep.
So between those two things, my theory is that temperatures temperatures and fires well exceeded anything that it was designed for or could handle.
So I'm not trying to derail it.
Well, of course you are. That's what you're here for. That's what I want you to do.
Yes,
So-
conspiracy
Now, you're
So-
supposed
so
to.
my-
If you're not here to be Conspiracy Dan, I don't know what your role is.
So the temperature of the fire, if samples that came from the building
yeah.
that are in these two papers that are peer-reviewed and they have nanothermite, nano-iron tubules that are like 1,000 times smaller than a human hair. They had to be found. They scooped up samples from around the World Trade Center, and these things are, the molecules in them are nowhere to be found in the structural material of the World Trade Center. So a reason that the fire temperatures could have been higher and more beams, columns could have been severed and melted especially, and weakened to the point of collapse, could be because there were chemicals in the environment that were not naturally there as part of the construction. So this is going pretty far down the conspiracy hole.
Yeah,
that it was sabotaged.
That it was sabotage. All right, hold on a second. Hey, let's have a slide on thermite.
I love it.
All right.
You are a well-prepared cross-examiner.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Prepared
All right.
conspiracy.
What are the ingredients in thermite? Iron oxide and aluminum. Both are going to be in that building in abundance. Okay. Did you know that the exterior cladding of the World Trade Center was clad in aluminum?
I did not.
Yes. This is absolutely someone, feel free to look up, that the exterior, so that...
It was lighter.
So, well, no, not necessarily. They needed the strength for the steel on the exterior. But steel rusts, and you would have to do maintenance to it frequently.
Yep.
Yikes. So what they did is they clad the exterior of, so all the steel that like is, as we look at a picture of it from the harbor or something, and it kind of shines in the sunlight, that's not steel, that's the aluminum coating on the outside of it. Inside the building, we've got a 50-year-old building. There's going to be iron oxide everywhere. Okay, it is going to be rife with iron oxide, right? Stuff that steel decking, steel bar joist, right? You put those in a building and you put it above a ceiling for 50 years. There's going to be iron oxide. Now, I'm not saying that stuff's rusting through or anything, but I'm saying there's going to be a healthy coating of iron oxide on a whole lot of the steel decking and interior steel stuff. Not the exterior because of the whole aluminum cladding thing, right? So here's the thing on the ones that are saying thermite. Thermite's a crappy material to use for this purpose. Problem with thermite is, one, it has a super, super high ignition temperature. You just can't set it off easily.
No, that's not true. Like magnesium?
You need like magnesium oxide wire. Yeah, you need...
Which starts. I mean, that's
it does.
That's what a fire starter is. Scrape it with your
knife.
It
is.
Put a lighter to it.
Right.
A cigarette lighter is not a high
no
thermal ignition temperature, and it catches your little kindling on fire real fast.
It does, but it would be very, very, very difficult. The suspension of belief for me with the thermite is that you get thermite hot, it does not want to stay put. It goes where it wants. Right? It's not a lateral cutting tool.
So that's the videos we're going to see.
Awesome. Okay, I can't wait to see them. Okay. All right. So here's my point, is that the idea that ingredients of thermite by themselves mean, oh, there was thermite. No. It means they found iron oxide and aluminum, which you should absolutely find in large quantities in a post that kind of a scenario when we see this. This also gets into the collapse time. I've seen some theories that's like, free fall and whatever. One of the NIST studies lists the fastest.
It is one of my questions.
It is, and it should be. But here's the thing. The NIST study, when it quotes, the building fell in like 9 seconds or something, okay? Look at picture on the left. You see all that those aren't desks. Those are major structural elements, and they are indeed free falling. And when they said the collapse happened in like 8 or 9 seconds, all they had to go on was they knew the moment at which it started to fall. Mm-hmm. They didn't know what time things hit. So what they did is they took the seismic data for the first heavy stuff that hit, which was free falling. All right? Here's the thing. Look at the picture on the right. Tell me when that fall ends. When you watch it, there is no way of knowing how long it took different pieces to get there. So all they could do is say, all right, we started getting seismic tremors at this moment. The total time between when it started falling and when the first stuff started hitting was whatever it was, 9 seconds. Help me out, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's about right.
9 seconds.
Somewhere between 7 and 9.
And then, some people say, buildings don't fall at free fall. And my argument is, no, they didn't, but those pieces did. And those are not small pieces. All right? So the free fall thing, I'm not really buying. The argument that they had to use thermite to cause it, also not buying. And here's the reason. It wasn't needed. The day that thing fell, I'm serious. I was watching, we were all watching it live.
If you're old.
Yeah, if you're old. If you're old and you got gray hair, not these two, but all right, if you're like, here, I got to point out, see, Dan's got gray hair. Yeah. I got a lot of gray hair. Mm-hmm. Okay, and if you're old and you watch this live, the thing that I was thinking that day, and I still think to this day, which totally tempers my judgment on this, right? Experiences how you temper your judgment. I remember thinking, I can't believe it stood up as long as it did. I literally thought it was an engineering marvel that those two towers stood for as long as they did without collapse. I literally thought, I was like, wow, what can possibly be holding them up this long? Knowing what I know about buildings and fire systems and all these other things, I was like, those are going to fall just any minute. I was just shocked that they didn't fall much, much sooner.
It was close to an hour of burning, wasn't it?
It was an hour for one of them and like hour 40 or hour 30 for the other. Mm-hmm. I was in absolute shock. I was not shocked by the one that got hit lower collapsing first.
Yep.
I did.
That makes sense.
I absolutely believed, that was what was going to happen. I mean, you take even an empty soda can, put a heavy weight on it, and barely touch the sides. Even though it's holding it, you just barely touch the side, and it'll crush instantly. Makes a cool party trick too, by the way. I've heard. I don't know. Do it with a Diet Coke can or something.
Big party.
Right.
I guess I kind of have a question about like the collapse.
Yes, please go for it.
So, the way that the building collapsed, like it just kind of like fell into itself, which to me is a little bit. I'm a little wary of the way that collapses, just based on my like structural knowledge so far.
I think that is an absolute positively reasonable question, and we have a little bit of an answer. See the image on the right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a very simplified image, but it gets hot. See the truss on the top right here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those trusses, as they heated up, they started to sag significantly. And they started pulling away from the exterior. What happened is, and you can actually, if you look at the videos of this really closely, you can actually see there start to form a bow around the impact areas where those trusses pull. Unfortunately, I'm going to say either way it was destined to fall.
Yeah.
But it actually pulled the shape in as that sagged down. And that is ultimately what caused this to squish and start pulling things inward. So now what you have, as you have that top piece falling, it's like narrowed at a neck. Mm-hmm. And now it falls into the tube below, but then it hits the impact, and pushes the walls outward. As it goes down, it creates this almost not quite a diesel piston effect, but a little bit, right? Because it's pushing things down and out, and it's like peeling the skin as it goes down and shooting and ejecting these pieces of the structure in all directions. And that's why it sucks inwards, is that for part of it did pull inwards and then push down. Does that make sense? Because that is a good question.
I mean, it looked like free fall and like you hear the pancake, where it just going to hit, and now that stress is
too much, overwhelms the piece below.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I kind of understand that, but considering that the core was columns and not the trusses, I'm still wary about it because it would still be like toward the outside. Like the columns aren't they're straight up and down. So I guess if you think about it.
Why wouldn't the columns have been standing there and stuff fell around them? Like
that's
20,
where
20
I'm
30,
kind of confused.
20, 30 stories worth of that stuff should be so strong at the bottom.
Yeah.
It was holding up 110 stories worth of stuff. That, like, I think this would kind of...
Where, like, something would be impaled or
Well, there was some of that in the wreckage. Okay,
it was
now,
barely
not
above
30,
the ground.
Not 30 stories worth, no.
It was 2 or 3.
Right. I'm sorry. You think? Oh, okay. Okay.
Like,
I'm
They're
understanding.
thinking the column should be standing
yeah.
up untouched
Yeah.
after this event.
Absolutely
just these
not.
columns.
Here, no, hold
There
on.
was so many of them, and it was on. It's
Yeah,
primarily on
I
one
like it a
side. There's
lot.
no way. At least.
Go to
with the-
structures. We have the answer to this in structures.
Oh, I'm in structures right now. 850.
Buckling. What does buckling mean?
Couldn't tell you.
Oh, come on.
We're only
now,
on
you're
chapter
killing
3
me.
of material.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
true.
All right.
It's only week 2
All right.
classes. Come on.
Okay, that's fair. All right, fine. All right, so we take a tall column. All right, load it.
It's not gonna.
It's different here. It's counting on being restrained,
Yeah.
you know, and if it's to, you know, the term slenderness ratio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the column to fail doesn't need. We could have the same weight on it, but make the column longer and remove intermediate supports,
Yeah.
and it will fail by itself.
Yeah,
take
but
the
how
guy-
are the?
What happened here is with the tremendous amount of weight above it that was intact,
Mhm.
now it just crushes in on itself, and we create columns that were that were unsupported. There's no way they could have stayed standing. They were going to get
I
crushed.
could imagine what you're saying if we're talking about like an antenna that has guy wires on it.
Yeah.
The reason that thing stands is because the guy wires keep it from being able to, you know, it's got
Yes.
every quarter or so of its height, it's
Yep.
being retained, and so I only have to make a structure.
Right.
The crushing strength, that's not the right term.
Sort of. It's good.
Yeah.
Only has to be, can be the whole thing,
Mhm.
but it's not near as strong if it buckles. So the guy
Yes.
wires keep it straight, and then it's crushing strength.
The
But
floors
that's
are that.
not the kind of same. That's not the same kind of thing as these are.
Oh,
these
it actually is.
These are massive I-beams that
Yes.
were the core of a super
Yes.
skyscraper.
And they still. And here's the thing on structural. It's not dependent on size here. You're going to calculate slenderness ratios no matter whether we're talking about a tiny little thing like this, you know, that is, like you're saying, a guide wire for you know, an antenna, or we're going to talk about a large concrete column. Slenderness ratio still matters. Buckling still matters. It is a function of weight
Yeah.
that determines its weight and length and the ratios therein. Those things are, and I'm not a structural engineer, so I'm sure I'll hear about this from my colleagues if I get this wrong. But slenderness ratio is something that you're calculating independent of, oh wait, this is a wide flange beam, we don't have to worry about slenderness. Yes, we do. Right? So
As
it
we
is
got
the
towards
same.
the bottom,
Mhm.
the last 10, 20, 30 stories of this thing,
Yes.
as this scenario you described where it sucked it in, it kind of got narrow, it fell in on top of the next floor and it came down.
Yep.
I'm with it for those top 80 floors,
Okay.
down to some number above the ground.
Okay.
Call it 10 or 20, where those structures, the structural integrity of that stuff has not been modified yet. I'm talking, you know, within seconds as the thing's coming down. So
Yep.
these things are still strong at the base and into the foundation of the building.
Right?
But instead of coming around the structure and somewhat staying, I'm not saying it would be perfect because I know that stuff got stripped. The stuff that caused it to have stability got stripped from around it, but none of them stood up. There was like one funky side of the building piece that was kind of at an angle
Yeah.
while President Bush was giving his speech after, but that was it, and it was like 20 feet in the air, you know,
Yeah.
maybe
20
three
feet.
stories up ish.
Well, I'm just
and
saying the sheer
it just
mass
seems
of
like
everything.
something should have.
Yeah. I
something
guess even
should have-
like if you think about the severed ones, like the ones that were severed, you would think that they were already severed, so like the stuff would just kind of fall off of
Yeah.
them. I don't know. That's like kind of where my mind's at too.
Well, I think it's hard to I don't think you can understate the violence of this thing falling.
No, not at all.
All right, it's difficult to understate the violence of the airplane hitting it to begin with, but definitely once this starts going, and the sheer mass of material that we have coming down and crushing them, we're very proud of our structures here as humans. And then nature reminds us very frequently that we're not really so clever after all.
You are small and insignificant.
You are small and insignificant.
Give 100 years, you won't even know this was here.
Exactly. And
let me go back to
Sure.
another. A reason, and I'm back to the conspiracy Dan stuff, that maybe those things didn't stand all the way was because firefighters and people that came out of the building that were in it when the plane hit heard secondary and tertiary explosions that they said came from the basement. They didn't come from up above. They heard these are firefighters.
Yeah.
They are trained in explosions and all kinds of things that are flammable and explosive. So they heard explosions coming from the basement. Some of them were old enough to, 83? When was the...
the original World Trade Center bombing.
Yeah. The dude in the basement. Some of those people
was
had
that
experience.
80s?
I think it was like 83.
Okay.
They said it sounded like that.
Okay. Well,
And then
I don't have
know.
an answer. I don't have an answer for their observations. And I will tell you, I'm definitely not going to question the motivation of one of the, they heard what they heard
Right.
or said they heard. It was quite the emotional and terrifying time. Okay. Not going to say that they didn't hear what they did because I wasn't there.
Eyewitnesses are not
Terribly
typically
reliable.
Yep, I get it.
Okay.
But-
Especially in a state of shock and all
especially
of the
in a
things,
state
yeah.
of shock. And here, there's something else that's going on here is that the way this building is reacting, there's a reason all these are theories. We don't have any others to study. We don't run planes into buildings to see how they collapse and test things out.
The only one that's ever collapsed in the entire history of the world was this one.
Yes.
That's a question mark in my mind.
It is. However, I would argue that one. Okay? Because there's a lot of things unique to this particular collapse. Right? This is the first time in the history of the United States that anyone has died from a fire in a fire sprinkled building. That has never happened prior to this event. Okay? So I mean
and that's a small stat compared to the
right.
it falling down.
So just understand is that I do think there is a sense of complacency that people get into when it's like, this has never happened, this will never gonna happen, and therefore there must be ulterior explanations to it. And I understand the thinking, and like I said, I'm firmly on the side to question things and question them hard. What I'm saying is that none of this, the columns in the center, let's just look at that one. It's not that they weren't unaffected by what had just happened. If we're talking about a fire burning with that much jet fuel and that long, and some of those columns in the middle, on one building, nearly all of them were cut at that level, right, in that analysis.
10.
Oh, I'm sorry, not 10. I'm thinking of one
And
of the
there
sides.
were like 50 some
Right.
on
Yeah.
each side.
Cut or damaged. I'm sorry. Cut or damaged or stripped off. That's what I'm thinking.
One side.
Yeah. No. In the center, the fire protection on almost all of them were stripped off. Here's the deal. Steel is going to conduct that heat really, really well. It's the entire column, the full length, is going to start heating up. And I don't know exactly where on this chart. Here, hold on a second. On this chart, I have no idea where one of those interior columns would be. Not 600,
No.
but also not 100.
Sure.
We're at a drastically elevated temperature. So they are weakened, not to the point of collapse perhaps, but definitely not as strong as they were an hour ago. And I think what you see a lot in have you been to the World Trade Center Museum?
No.
You absolutely should go. Go once. That's enough. It's overwhelming. For somebody that was there that day, it will, they've got tapes of all of everything that was said and
Been
done.
to Pentagon.
The Pentagon and everything.
Not the World Trade Center.
What's that?
I rarely go into New York City.
Okay, all right.
I dislike it with great intensity.
I understand. But going once to the World Trade Center Museum is worth it. It'll be traumatic, but what you're going to see and this is something I took a picture of, there is a piece of one of the columns at the base, and it is folded around like a paperclip. I mean, it is massive, just the flanges on this wide flange beam, the individual flanges are like this thick, and of course camera's not on. So, they're like 2 inches thick, just the individual pieces, and it looks like a kid was playing with a paperclip. The forces here are so massive.
Yep.
And it was causing things to happen that are just unprecedented because dropping a building that big on them just isn't done. So all I'm saying is that even under best scenario, none of those columns after the top part of this building burning an hour, everything was being affected. Everything was being altered. And it just collapses and you have more weight on them than they ever could have withstood. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. All right.
No, it's okay. I guess it's just like the collapse was just eerily uniform, considering that the plane was on one side and it hit, and like most of the columns are very concentrated. The building falling is just very uniform. It's like too uniform to understand structurally. Like there should have been some sort of, and like think of all the weight. If you're saying that plane weighs 400,000 pounds,
yeah,
the building really should have, like, there should have been some lean in my eyes. Like you were telling me you're adding 400,000 pounds of weight to that side structure.
Ooh, but it was gone very quickly. Most of that fuel burnt up within that time.
But how much of the fuel? How much of the plane? The plane.
Of thousands
Yeah,
of pounds.
the plane is still
The plane
weighing.
still weighed 300,000 pounds.
And now
I don't
it's
know what
shards.
I don't know what that is,
It is.
in
Here we go.
ratio
Hold on a
to the
second.
building weight. Like, what did the building weigh per
At
floor?
that floor,
Oh,
yeah.
Are we talking
I
that
think
weighed a few million pounds?
yeah. I
then I
think
don't-
it would have been
ish?
millions-ish.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't
That's
know.
a good. We have to figure
No,
that
you
out.
have you have a very
Engineering
valid
homework.
point.
Engineering
Right.
homework.
Engineering
Yeah,
homework. All
writing
right.
it down.
Awesome. These guys have.
Well, yeah, the weight of the building is just, I think, so much greater than the weight
Yeah.
of the airplane.
It is. It
Mhm.
is. I think it is. I think it would be shocking how much that would overpower it. And that I think that's why it. When you watch it live, how much did the building move when it hit?
Not much.
It's like the building was like grunt.
I wish there was better
Yeah.
video of that. But like a
well.
Too bad people didn't have Snapchat or anything.
a bullet doesn't weigh very much,
Yeah.
and it will knock a human over. It's a half an ounce thing.
Oh,
Well,
true.
And so like this 500 or 600
Here we
miles
go.
an hour.
Watch this here. So watch. This is a simulation. So once again, we're talking about theory, but it's not like big chunks of the plane were left on that face. All right. You ever see
Can we watch like a real, like a, not like.
not simulation?
Yeah. I just feel like, I need to see that. Yeah.
All right. Well, no, that's obviously a simulation coming. All right. All right.
It would only take 15 seconds.
Yeah, we got
Go-
the real thing. Hold on a second. Let's see here. I want to say this one.
You're on the
is-
collapse. Do the
Oh, am I on the collapse? I'm sorry.
do the plane. Yeah.
Oh.
All right. All right. Oh, I remember this. Remember, Dan, you remember these guys? They were out and they were investigating a call,
Oh yeah.
and they had a camera guy with him,
Yeah.
and he captures at ground level.
Yeah, the building hardly budges.
Yeah.
Can you rewind it for us? Put it on.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Here, let me get the screen a little bit bigger.
And are the people watching this on
Yes.
the video? Yeah.
Yeah.
The
I got
people
this.
are watching.
The people.
Yes.
The people.
There it is. Oh, there we go. There you go. Let me come back to it again.
That could be interesting. I wish that was stable and you could watch that antenna on top. You know, if it.
I
did a-
think that is the only known
wiggle.
video
Of-
of the first impact.
Mm.
That's the first one.
Which people didn't have cell phones.
Oh no,
There was no
No.
such thing.
I didn't
Yeah.
know.
Everybody out
I-
with
Yeah.
a camera.
The
Yeah.
only reason that was ever taken is that it was a cameraman sitting there. Let's see here. He just happened to be videotaping with.
This
here
is
it
what I was watching.
Yeah, this is the second one. Not sure who that
when the
dude
second
is.
one hit with the live news broadcasts and stuff.
Yep.
You see the flame come out the other side, I think, on this one.
Yeah. Here, give it just a second.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
No.
that is from that side. Okay.
That's from that side. There, that's the spray that you're talking about, the other side,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah.
I think I was watching ABC. There was only 3 channels to
Yeah.
watch, you know.
Yeah, there's only 3, you guys.
Now there's like
Nowadays, it's-
billions, so
Yeah.
pick your poison, I
yeah,
guess.
I don't know if it's any better, though. All right,
Watch Joe.
right,
Right.
all right. So the I guess the point here is that after that hits, right? It's not like that plane would have caused it to lean to one side because it didn't get caught in the edge. It was shredded into billions of pieces. You know, you ever watch slow motion of an apple getting shot by a bullet?
Sure.
I'm sure I have.
Yeah.
All right, and what I'm talking about is, you know, the law of conservation of momentum, where you see the picture and you see the apple exploding in both directions. All right, now on an apple, the bullet passes through because so much harder, but the apple itself just shreds in all directions. And something here is that plane is not causing the building to list to one side. The bulk of the weight in that plane is jet fuel, and that is going everywhere. It is sloshing around elevator shafts and stairwells, and it's going down shafts. It's going to cause... Just think about this, Dan. One of the things that... one theory, I don't know if I agree with this, but one of them I read said that they think that most of that jet fuel was vaporized in the first half hour. Maybe even sooner than that. Because when it hits, that jet fuel atomizes in all directions.
Yeah, sure.
And then explodes, and hence the big fireball and everything. A lot of the fire was from secondary stuff. All right, you guys might not understand this, but there used to be a whole lot of paper involved in running an office. I mean, imagine how many incendiaries are in an office space in 2001.
File cabinets.
File cabinets and file cabinets
And
full
the-
of manuals and folders
And the carpet
all the
and
records.
the furniture. Everything's plastic.
Everything's plastic. It's either paper, plastic, or cardboard. You get 3 flavors of stuff in an office space. So the whole thing is vaporizing. Well, I'm sorry. The fuel vaporizes, sets everything on fire instantly. Hence why, you know, I'm of the at least 600 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius crowd. You know, maybe closer to 700 or 800. I don't know.
Mine's all limited on amount of oxygen that was available.
Yeah. Well, I think that probably caused it to do a controlled burn that lasted a long time.
Okay.
All right. Well, hold on a second. Let me see here. So we are getting hey, yeah, you guys have been talking a long time, and we didn't even get to everything we wanted to talk about. All right. Let's let the students
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
wrap things up here for us. Okay, you guys take this last 10 minutes, however much you want, kind of make some observations about our little discussion here.
What
Right.
what things, I'm curious from both
Yeah.
of you, As you did some research into it, what were the things that caused you to question? I think you've had a couple more. You start and bounce off each other. What things like, I didn't understand this. This didn't seem right to me.
You know, I mean, I think the way that the tower fell and everything like that, I know Liv was questioning it, but really it doesn't seem out of the equation to me. In fact, I think that a premeditated sort of attack on these towers is more outlandish than, and I'm speaking about like stripping down to the steel, structural steel, implanting explosives. I think that would be a further reach than what we were discussing here and kind of what we were taught originally.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it looks really similar to like a controlled demolition. I know that I've seen a couple of those. They've done one at Iowa State. I watched that video.
Oh yeah, the towers.
Yeah, the towers.
Towers.
And
Good
it
riddance.
looks like
We had 3 generations of connection with the tower. My dad helped build it when he was here at vet school.
You lived in it, didn't you?
I lived.
Brad
in
lived
I
in it
lived in the
too.
towers, and my son. I was in Afghanistan, and my son came here with my wife, the whole family, and they watched it go down. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
that was fun.
Yeah. All right, keep going.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
But yeah, anyway, it just like it reminds me of that, and honestly, just like the I guess like non-uniform way the plane hit. It hit from one side, in my eyes, like if the plane was disintegrated into 1,000 pieces, like I really thought it would kind of go to one way or the other.
Well,
so.
it's the fact that the plane kind of exploded in the building that
That's what I'm
it's not
saying.
just kind of sitting all of its weight in one spot.
But then, like, what's if those beams were severed? Then, like, if they were severed, there's no plane. It's like all into these like millions of little pieces. The building really should have fallen then onto one side. That like proves the point even more.
No, I don't think it does.
I'm not
but
following
I'm
that
with him. I'm
logic.
with him on that one. On that one.
Maybe just at the beginning, like if it severed one corner, like that first collapse. Maybe if I haven't studied it, that little moment when the building goes, but if it went that and then down,
Yeah, maybe
I
whatever.
would be-
Yeah.
Well, I guess
because I don't think it's gonna be solid enough to just fall
Yeah,
all the way
yeah.
over. If it had,
At least like
and-
the
and all
top
that.
portion, you would think would be a little bit
Oh, it-
skewed, and then
actually it was just a little bit skewed.
you have to watch it.
Yeah, you have to watch. The thing to look for is there's an antenna at the top, and it looks like the antenna falls first, but it's actually tipping slightly. It tips, and then the thing comes down, right? But these are like I mean, we're really splitting hairs on
Yeah.
on those. I think the thing for me, and Dan, I'll let you close here. You as the guest, but for me, we are so far outside of the realm of what a building was designed to do. And I said this before, but I was still shocked it lasted as long as it did before it fell. I think we do not and cannot design buildings to withstand this type of thing. I think there was a conspiracy that day, and a bunch of bloodthirsty jerks boarded planes with the intent to kill people. And to be honest, given the amount of destructive force in one of those planes, they didn't need any assistance. They didn't need thermite. They didn't need those things. In all honesty, they had everything that they needed, and that's why it worked. And I don't know how you could design buildings to overcome. I mean, I know it exists. We probably could design buildings to overcome that type of threat, and nobody would be able to afford them or live in them.
For sure.
So
it's also
designing,
just, like,
what's
why?
that?
There's just like not really a huge purpose for that
Right,
design.
right. There's not. There's not. So I think they designed admirably, given the conditions of the day. Okay. So I mean, I guess that would be my thought. Dan, any thoughts? Dan's like, follow the thermite. No. Okay.
The thermite is a piece. It's a small piece, but there's just trickles of, I don't understand that. And all that together with the fact that it's the only 2 buildings ever in the history of the world to go down from a fire, let alone no one's even died in one, and these 2 fell completely to the ground. Understand a guy hit by an airplane is like, it felt like in my head that the structural steel should have maintained something to stand up, if not fully, partially,
I
and
think,
neither of those happened.
You're really skimming past the part where it got hit by an airplane.
No, not
I
at all.
mean, you know,
No, not at all.
thing was-
I get it.
full of fuel, very
but,
heavy.
But it didn't. Okay, if that was the reason, in my mind, it like goes down immediately or something close. You know, like severed it, boom, it goes
I
down.
think
At
the
least the
real
top.
reason is the heat
Yeah.
and you know the steel losing more than half of its strength.
And throughout most of my time of looking at this, which was not super deep, I thought it would be that 600 degree Celsius was my big sticking point. Like it can't get to that hot enough to melt the steel, and this was close, but the weakening grafts do more to that, and the weight on top, it couldn't support it. So I am swayed. Should we ask them what their
Yeah, that's
overall-
right. Yeah, okay. Overall here.
You
'cause
guys
we
were
gotta
kinda
go 'cause,
undecided.
yeah.
Okay.
Right, yeah, we gotta go.
She's tapping her watch.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say like it's definitely the plane. Yes, contributed to it for sure. There's definitely some other things where it's like
Did it?
where it's like maybe there's
might
some
have helped
other
it.
like stuff, and especially being wary of the government. A lot of the information and
Yep.
studies have come from the government, so be wary of that. And
Oh yeah, we'll have to have more conspiracy Dan
Yeah.
talks because
yeah, I'm
there'll be
excited
other
for
stuff.
that.
There'll be
Yeah.
other ones where we're like,
We're bringing drinks.
yeah,
and
we're like,
all of the
Cigars.
things, cigars.
we're all gonna be on the same page of those. We're like, that is
Yeah.
some shady crap right there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, but until that moment, I just want to say, Dan, thank you for coming in and participating. I know you got actually a real job sort of now.
Oh,
you know.
awesome.
Yeah, he's gainfully employed again. Okay,
Oh.
that's nice. And students, I know you guys have a lot going on, and I appreciate you coming. We're going to save this for posterity's sake because I think it was a good discussion worth having, and probably we will have others and love to have you back for those. So thank you so much for your time, and we're going to wrap up this episode.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.